Look, if you're going to invest in Bitcoin, a short time horizon is 4 years, a mid-time horizon is 10 years. The right time horizon is forever. Warren Buffett said, if you wouldn't hold it for 10 years, you shouldn't hold it for 10 minutes. Look, Bitcoin is digital property. It's universally acknowledged as common property because it had a fair distribution, no ICO, no management team. Satoshi disappeared. It's pari passu to a commodity, to land, to gold. And it's pretty important that it be deemed property. The rest of the cryptos could be securities. There's just a lot of regulatory overhang and question about whether they're securities or not. And I think that the great innovation is the creation of common property in cyberspace. It took us 13 years to get to the point where that's universally acknowledged. So that makes Bitcoin the safe haven for a public investor or a public company. Everything else feels more like either venture capital or speculation. And I understood the power of dominant digital networks like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple because I rode that for a decade. I also understood the detriment of not being that dominant network. MicroStrategy competes against Microsoft. We compete against companies 100 times as big as us. When we got to 2020, what I saw was the winning strategy is digital transformation if you have the dominant network. The losing strategy is to continue to work harder and exponentially harder for a currency growing exponentially weaker. And I had a sense of the consequences if we did nothing, because I had seen the demise of 99% of my competitors, and I could see where we were headed if we stuck with the status quo. We would have to either adopt a Bitcoin strategy or sell the company, and we elected to pursue Bitcoin. Many people didn't really understand Bitcoin very well. They haven't taken the time to focus on it. Even today, I would say that 98% of the population hasn't spent 10 hours thinking hard about Bitcoin. So in the year 2020, I think most people were just ignoring it. It wasn't really registering with them, maybe 1%. I think that when we talked to our investors, what was interesting is privately, most investors were aware of Bitcoin and they thought it was a good idea. Publicly, their institutions that they're part of have a 3 to 5 year time lag from the point at which they can adopt new ideas. Look, if you're going to invest in Bitcoin, a short time horizon is 4 years, a mid-time horizon is 10 years. The right time horizon is forever. Warren Buffett said, if you wouldn't hold it for 10 years, you shouldn't hold it for 10 minutes. So if you look at the course of 4 years, no one's ever lost money over 4 years holding Bitcoin. And if you look at, our experience, we started buying it at $10,000 and now it's up by a factor of 4. So given the right time horizon, you're fine. So it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it makes it the most exciting, interesting thing in the financial universe everywhere in the world. And the curse is it can induce anxiety for people that have a short attention span or are focused on a narrow time horizon. There's a lot of dynamics here. If you look at the entire crypto ecosystem, you have a set of regulatory uncertainty, especially regulatory uncertainty around stable coins and crypto tokens and whether or not they're securities. And that creates a little bit of anxiety. You have a lot of leverage offshore, right? You have a lot of crypto exchanges that can trade with up to 20x leverage. And those crypto exchanges have many, many tokens that are cross-collateralized. And between them and the DeFi exchanges, you can get much higher than 20x leverage. So that's a second source of volatility. The crypto markets are almost designed to encourage volatility. And that creates kind of a love-hate relationship between the crypto ecosystem and the Bitcoin hodlers. The Bitcoin hodlers are holding for, a decade, and sometimes for 100 years and sometimes for 1,000 years. And yet you've got fast money hedge funds that have a tax incentive, a huge amount of leverage, and massive volatility, But you have two totally different investment mentalities here. And when they come together, the result is you've got, in my opinion, the world's least risky asset to hold over the next century called Bitcoin. And you've got the world's most volatile, fast money market, called crypto. And they're both joined at the hip, for better or for worse, in the year 2022.
What does the trajectory of Bitcoin look like to you this year?
I feel like it's consolidating at this level. This is a great entry point for institutional investors. I talk to high net worth individuals, family offices, public company executives, private company owners, and they watch Bitcoin run up in 2021. And there are a lot of people that would be afraid to own it if it was going up 400% a year. But if they're staring at it and it's 40% off the all-time high and it's consolidating, and they see that it's being embraced by people like Bill Miller, by very well-respected investors. It's being embraced by the regulators. It's being embraced by senators and congressmen and public investors and public companies. They're looking at this as like a good entry point. I'd be remiss, Emily, not to make a more important point, which is what's really going on here at a macro level is inflation. The CPI headline inflation is 7%. Look at the Turkish lira. It's collapsing. The peso is collapsing. So there's a volatility story for a conventional investor in Manhattan that's got a portfolio of equities. But 75% of the world can't buy the S&P index. They're in Africa, Asia, South America, and if they've got their assets in banks, they're going to have them seized. They can't buy the equity. So the real story here is digital property that solves a problem that 8 billion people face.
The big question is then, are you going to buy more? Yes or no?
Yeah, we're going to buy more. We're buying more with our cash flows. We've adopted a Bitcoin standard, Emily. That means that when we generate cash, we sweep it into Bitcoin. We've been generating, anywhere from $70 to $100 million of cash flow. So we will also buy Bitcoin with debt. We bought Bitcoin with $1.7 billion worth of convertible debt. We bought Bitcoin with a $500 million senior secured note that we pay 6 1/8% interest on. We also issued $1 billion worth of equity at the market, and we converted it all into Bitcoin. The 100K party. When I did that interview, it was the fall of 2020, and I think Bitcoin was trading at 15,000. And John Vallis roped me in. He said, "Will you host the 100K party?" And I said, "Well, sure, I will." There was no doubt in their mind the party's coming quite soon. I was just amazed at the confidence of Bitcoiners. I don't have a price target for when it's going to happen. What I learned is laser focus. Stuff takes time. I'm comfortable with us working through this year over year. I don't need instant overnight success.